Today, we uncover the 5 honey brands the UK should be warning about. We're opening a jar the British public hasn't dared to look into closely enough. Because behind the golden glow of supermarket honey sits one of the UK's most quietly controversial food categories. For years, honey was known as a health product, natural, wholesome, a superfood you trust without checking the label twice. But then came the headlines, the investigations, the lab reports, and the now infamous fake foreign honey scandal that left shoppers across the country wondering what exactly they've been spreading on toast every morning. Now, to be clear, we're not here to claim that the products in this video are being labeled fake by us. We don't make these claims or speculate or accuse, but we do examine what the public is saying, what the labels reveal, and the patterns that recently made honey the center of one of the biggest food authenticity scandals in the UK. Because when the scandal broke, something interesting happened. We didn't suddenly start distrusting all honey. We started paying closer attention to our own jars. We began tasting it differently, reading labels more carefully, comparing textures, colors, and aromas. And for the first time, thousands of everyday Brits were reading reviews that were, let's just say, extremely eye-opening. So, in this investigation, we're here to listen to them, the customers who bought these honeys, opened them, tasted them, and felt strongly enough to warn the next person. The honest, unfiltered experiences of UK shoppers and what they noticed when they dipped their spoon into the jar. These are the 7 honeys that sparked the most confusion, the most complaints, and the biggest questions from the British public alive. Number 1. Stamford Street Co. Clear Honey. If there's one honey in the UK that sparks more public confusion, more heated customer reviews, and more questions than answers, it's this one. And the irony? Most shoppers only picked it up because it was cheap, clear, and sitting right there on the shelf next to the real stuff. But what they weren't expecting was a flavour profile so unusual that the reviews read like warning labels. Because the overwhelming pattern here isn't subtle. Customers aren't saying it's a bit bland or not my favourite. They're saying it tastes like golden syrup, corn syrup, and in one case even battery acid. That's straight from a verified buyer who described the first taste as sugar syrup and the aftertaste as a chemical burn all the way down the throat. They put it very plainly, if this stuff has been anywhere near a B during its production, I'd be amazed. Another reviewer said they tried to revive a tired bee with it. The bee refused to go near it, which is honestly one of the most unsettling reviews I've ever seen on a supermarket product. Thinking about it. But the strangest part, it's marketed under a name that sounds comfortably British, Stamford Street Co., yet so many reviewers reported discovering later, usually in tiny print, that the honey inside is sourced from China and only packed in the UK. And while origin alone doesn't prove anything, the combination of ultra-low price, vague labeling, and hundreds of reviews describing it as syrup-like is exactly the pattern experts keep saying the public should watch out for. People describe it as extremely runny, so runny it literally slides off toast before you can spread it. Others say it crystallizes into sugar in cold weather, like a jar of syrup left outside. Some say it has no smell, which is unusual for natural honey. And many point out the same thing. If this is pure honey, why does it taste nothing like honey? A lot of shoppers felt misled, not because they're honey experts, but because they expected honey to taste, well, like honey. And when they tasted this, the reaction was immediate confusion, disappointment, and a wave of reviews urging others to be careful, check the label, and in one case calling for the supermarket to investigate the provenance of this product. Stamford Street Co. Clear Honey is the one that made hundreds of Brits ask the same uncomfortable question. What exactly am I eating, and where is it from? Number 2. Hilltop Blossom Honey. On paper, Hilltop Blossom Honey looks clean, polished, and trustworthy. a brand that positions itself as modern, transparent, and proudly British. But scroll through the reviews, look past the marketing, and a very different picture emerges. One that made countless shoppers stop mid-spoonful and ask a very simple question. What exactly am I tasting? Because the first big shock for buyers wasn't even the taste, it was the label. Right there, printed on the back in plain sight, origin, a blend of non-EU honeys. And for many British shoppers, that set off alarms immediately. Why? Because in recent years, every major investigation into honey authenticity, EU labs, UK councils, independent researchers, all say the same thing. The highest risk category for unusual results in tests is always non-EU blended honey, especially when it comes from multiple unidentified countries. That doesn't mean anything is wrong, but it does mean people look closer. And in Hilltop's case, the reviews say that's exactly what happened. One customer put it bluntly, a blend of non-EU honeys which recent surveys have shown to be mixed with syrup as non-EU countries are allowed to do. Others didn't hold back on the flavour. Some mentioned a strange aftertaste, something they couldn't quite place but knew wasn't the rich floral taste they expect from blossom honey. Another called it way too sugary, the kind of sweetness that doesn't feel natural. And that's a recurring theme. Reviewers describing a sweetness that hits hard and fast, more like a syrup than a honey that's been slowly created by bees. Then we check the brand's own website, and the marketing language is almost poetic. A carefully sourced blend of non-EU honeys, all top tier and 100% the real deal. But many shoppers reading that looked back at their jar and wondered, if it's carefully sourced, why does the taste feel off? Why the unusual aftertaste? Why the sugar-heavy profile? And why blend honeys from multiple undisclosed countries in the first place? For a brand that markets itself as premium, modern, and health-focused, Hilltop Blossom Honey has earned a surprisingly long list of reviews saying the exact opposite of what the branding promises. A honey that leaves people not only disappointed, but suspicious of why it doesn't taste like honey at all. It's here because so many British shoppers tried it and immediately felt something wasn't right. Number 3. Sainsbury's Clear Honey. This one is surprising because Sainsbury's is a supermarket people trust. It's where families feel safe buying essentials. But for Sainsbury's Clear Honey, the most common reaction from customers wasn't comfort or reliability. It was confusion. Deep, instant confusion the moment the jar was opened. At first glance, it looks like every other supermarket honey. Golden, smooth, affordable. But according to the reviews, the moment it touches the tongue, something feels off. Really off. Because the feedback from hundreds of shoppers repeats the same pattern with almost eerie consistency. One reviewer said they tasted it side by side with another supermarket honey and found barely a hint of honey taste or smell. Several compared it directly to golden syrup, with one person asking outright, "Is this even honey?" But it gets stronger. Someone wrote, "This isn't unpleasant, but it tastes more like toffee and honey." Another said, "I can't believe this can be sold as honey." And one of the most brutal reviews simply stated, "This honey has never seen a bee." Now, obviously, we cannot claim that, but the fact customers felt compelled to write that publicly tells you everything about the flavor profile they experienced. Many noted it was extremely runny, even by Clear Honey standards. Others mentioned a nasty aftertaste, something chemical, bitter, or just strangely artificial. But perhaps the biggest red flag to shoppers wasn't even the taste, it was the label. Sainsbury's Clear Honey doesn't specify a country of origin. Not British, not EU, nothing. And for many shoppers who bought this jar, the moment it hit their tongue, they weren't tasting nectar. They were tasting something that reminded them of syrup, with a faint whisper of honey somewhere far in the background. Number 4.
Tesco Clear Honey. Tesco is the biggest supermarket in the country, so you can imagine how many people are buying this product. And the reviews here aren't just disappointed, they're very, very concerned. Not because it tastes bad, but because people genuinely don't recognize it as honey at all. The first theme is striking: health expectations. Prosumers pointed out that honey is supposed to be a health food, something natural, something with benefits, something people use intentionally for digestion, for immunity, for soothing the throat. So when reviewers describe Tesco Clear Honey as a seed syrup, the opposite of a health food, that's not just a taste complaint, that's someone feeling like they bought honey for their well-being and instead ended up with something that left them questioning what it's doing to their bodies. And that leads directly into the second theme: identity confusion. A lot of shoppers noticed something unusual on the label. It says, "Made naturally from flower nectar collected by honeybees." A perfectly normal sentence, until people started reading it slowly, then asking, is this describing the process bees normally do, or is it describing a process without bees using the same nectar? One reviewer openly wondered whether the wording was cleverly crafted to sound like honey without actually confirming how it was produced. Customers didn't mince words either. They made taste comparisons that don't show up in other supermarket honeys. This one is repeatedly likened to corn syrup, rice syrup from China, treacle, golden syrup with water added. And then there's the texture. People described it as shockingly watery, with an odd thinness that doesn't behave like clear honey. One person said it sticks to the teeth like syrup. Another said they gave them headaches, and many noticed a nasty, bitter, sour smell that caught them off guard. But perhaps the biggest red flag to shoppers wasn't even the taste, it was the label. Tesco Clear Honey doesn't specify a country of origin. Not British, not EU, nothing. And for many shoppers who bought this jar, the moment it hit their tongue, they weren't tasting nectar. They were tasting something that reminded them of syrup, with a faint whisper of honey somewhere far in the background.
Number 5. Pasieca Multi-Flower Honey. If there's one honey on this list that caught people off guard simply because they expected something traditional and natural, it's this one. Multi-flower honey sounds wholesome. It sounds floral. It sounds like something you'd pick up from a small village market in Eastern Europe. But the reviews tell a very different story, one full of shock, confusion, and customers who felt strongly enough to log in just to warn others. The first thing that stood out to reviewers wasn't even the taste, it was the color. Multiple people described it as having an unnatural yellow color, something that immediately made them question what they'd bought. Not golden, not amber, but a bright, almost artificial-looking shade of yellow that didn't match the honey they were used to from other supermarkets or local producers. And as soon as they tasted it, the opinions only intensified. One reviewer didn't hold back, writing, "Very bad, nothing like honey I know." But the most repeated theme, the sweetness. Not just sweet, but extreme sweetness. Reviewers describe the flavor as sugary and unpleasant, the texture as very thin, and the overall experience as closer to a strong syrup than anything floral or multi-flower. One customer went even further, saying it felt like pure sugar with an artificial taste layered on top. We don't want to be harsh, but we're simply reporting what customers themselves publicly said after buying, opening and tasting it. And the pattern in those comments is unmistakable. People expected a multi-flower honey with depth, aroma and richness, and instead described something that left them disappointed, confused, and in some cases even suspicious of the overall quality. Number 6. Asda Classic Ronnie Honey. Asda's Classic Ronnie Honey has one of the strangest review histories on this entire list, not just because people complained, but because so many customers described a shift in the product over time. Buyers who had purchased it for years suddenly started reporting that something felt different, something felt off, and for many of them the alarm bells rang the moment Asda quietly removed the word pure from the label. One reviewer said flat out, they've removed pure, most likely because it's cut with syrup. When the British public notice branding changes, especially when paired with a new taste or texture, they pay attention.
One person said the lid was dusty, the jar looked old, and the crystallization was so advanced they questioned how long it must have been sitting there before it reached their kitchen. They asked for a refund immediately. Others didn't complain about crystallization itself. Honey can crystallize naturally, but about the taste of those crystals. One reviewer said once it crystallized, the flavor was different, a strange taste that didn't match honey at all. Another recurring theme was identity confusion. Several customers said the honey dissolved in water instantly, which made them think the product behaved more like a sweetener or glucose solution than something produced by bees. One even said they were planning to report it to trading standards because the behavior was so unusual. And then there's the health angle, which almost no other honey on this list triggers. Multiple reviewers said they bought honey for its natural properties, for its benefits, for its richness, for its goodness, only to claim that Asta's version felt like the exact opposite. One person said it had no goodness in it at all. Another said they felt misled because they bought honey for health reasons, but felt like they ended up with something sugary that didn't deliver what they expected from a natural product. Even long-time Asta shoppers complained that the large jars were discontinued, replaced with something they described as cheap version honey, which they believed crystallized faster and tasted weaker. There were even reviews accusing the new version of being watered down, changed, or not the honey we had before. These are the direct voices of Asta customers who bought it, tasted it, and felt something wasn't right.
Bonus number 7, Little Over Apiary's Acacia Honey. This one is almost tragic because the label, the branding, even the word acacia sets an expectation. Everyone knows acacia honey. Pale, delicate, runny, floral, often described as one of the smoothest honeys in the world. So shoppers opened this jar expecting elegance and instead found something that had them staring at it in disbelief before they'd even opened the lid. One reviewer summed up the shock perfectly. We looked at the jar, saw the horrid solid mass and said, "This isn't acacia honey." And you can understand why. Acacia honey is famously slow to crystallize. Some jars stay liquid for years, yet customers of this product described it as solid, cloudy, crystallized, and full of sugar crystals. Even before tasting it, many felt something was wildly inconsistent with the acacia honey they knew. Then they tasted it, and the confusion turned into disappointment. Review after review described the same experience. No aroma, no floral notes, no acacia flavor at all. Instead, consumers said it tasted like nothing but sugary, intensely sugary, thick, and strangely flavorless. One person said it was so lacking in taste that it could only be used for cooking, because putting it on toast felt like a waste. Others went further. This is not honey, it is sugar. There is no honey taste, no smell, nothing. Only the label says it's honey. Now, we are not making that claim. These are direct customer quotes, but where multiple reviewers describe a honey as having zero flavor, especially a variety known for its gentle taste, it raises questions about why the sensory profile is so far from expectations. But the most interesting review concerns infants. One customer noticed there was no infant warning, something commonly printed on honey jars, and wondered whether that meant the product contained so little traditional honey that it wasn't considered a risk. Again, their speculation, not ours, but the fact a shopper even had that thought is telling. And then there's the origin issue. People saw Little Over Apiary's a warm, local-sounding English name, only to discover it's actually a blend of EU and non-EU honeys, leaving them feeling misled. One reviewer even said, "I was fooled. What a sweet name, so English, but this is far from English honey." Little Over Apiary's acacia honey didn't spark disappointment because it was cheap. It sparked disappointment because customers bought something called acacia honey and couldn't find anything in the jar that resembled acacia honey at all. Thanks for listening. And remember, stay aware, stay sharp, and protect your plate.